with our partners. Sorry, Amy. Together with our partners in education and economic and workforce development, it is essential that we all work collaboratively to prepare students to be career ready while building a talent pipeline here in Lackawanna County. So as you just saw, the timing, this session is being recorded and it will be posted to the Chamber of Commerce website for future viewing. The other favor that I'd like to ask you is if you would mute yourselves, and then following the presentation later today, if you do have any questions, you can post those questions in the chat. So with that, Amy, I know there are some other business items that you would like to address, right? And
no, I think we'll just go right into introducing Terry.
We're ready to go right into introducing Terry. Well, I would like to say thank you to Amy Leister from the Greater Scranton Chamber of Commerce for all of her work. She serves as vice president there and does a wonderful job, and it's a pleasure working with her. So, all right, we're ready to go here and go right into, it's our pleasure to be able to host Terry Ooms today. She's the executive director of the Institute. The Institute provides essential research, data analysis, and consultation to the private, public, nonprofit, and institutional sectors. It's a partnership with 13 higher education institutions and the business community, and engaging in community research, public policy, and data for more informed decision-making. The Institute promotes regional cohesion, social innovation. It convenes and facilitates and provides research support for 7 issue-based task forces with over 100 volunteers. Several of the Institute's research studies have served as basis for new Pennsylvania legislation, and the Institute has conducted research for organizations in 14 states. Their work is very impressive and relevant, and I'm proud to introduce Terry Ooms, who serves, again, as their executive director. She's responsible for research, development, operational functions. She's strategic and data-driven, and her presentation today on the state of the workforce is not only timely, but will help inform not only a better understanding of what is happening, but will allow all of us to strategize and plan accordingly. Terry has a BS in public administration and an MBA in finance, both from the University of Scranton. And from 1997 to 2004, Ooms served as president and CEO of the Inland Empire Economic Partnership in Riverside, California. Please join me in welcoming Terry Ooms.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Thank you, Amy, and thank you to Skills in Scranton. Excited to be here and share some of our data with you. I think you'll be pleased and excited to learn about the opportunity here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. It is a very exciting time to be in the workforce, contemplating being in the workforce. And I dare anyone to say that Northeastern Pennsylvania is not the area of great opportunity, and you'll see why in just a few minutes. So let's talk about some of the data that we have to present today about the region and the current state of affairs. So everyone's looking at the unemployment rate and benchmarking a lot of different things about whether it's going up or down. And it has been trending downward since the pandemic. And while that is certainly good news, it's important to note that the rate is actually a product of an overall formula, one that includes the total labor force. And the bottom line is our labor force, and not just ours, it's across the country, has been shrinking, meaning people are leaving the labor force. They're not actively looking for work. And that's happening due to a variety of reasons. The pandemic pushed a lot of people into early retirement, pushed a lot of people into opening their own businesses, which is a very positive thing. But then it's a lot of people have been left out of workforce opportunity because of challenges with childcare, elder care, transportation, and even with personal health issues. It's estimated that around 5 to 6% of our population is not working due to childcare reasons alone. This region tends to have higher propensity of individuals with diseases and health conditions, as well as physical disabilities. And a lot of those health indicators are reasons why people are not going back to the workforce and are related to COVID. The question remains whether some of those people will come back to the workforce or not. I know a lot of people believe that the workforce will bounce back when they're no longer paid to stay home. But the additional unemployment ended last July, and the child tax credit ended earlier this year, and yet the situation hasn't changed. COVID was certainly the precipitating factor in many of these things, and they're likely to keep people out of the workforce for good, or to search for remote jobs where they could work for any number of global companies and remain home. I think it's important to remember one thing about COVID, though, and we'll talk more about it as we go along, is employers were beginning to struggle to find employees in a pre-COVID world. And that factor is important because that actually lays the groundwork for future efforts at workforce development. The other component, prior to COVID, people were worried about artificial intelligence and what it would do and keep people out of the workforce. And COVID has been a precipitating factor in advancing artificial intelligence. But because of our genuine workforce development issues, this is actually not a bad thing. If entry-level jobs in some sectors become automated, it will help companies operate and generate revenue and profits. But what it also does is require that our workforce take it up a notch and be more educated, be more skilled, and be more trained. So very helpful way that we are moving to artificial intelligence for some of those jobs earlier on. What that means now and in the future is that employees are going to need more skills. They're going to need more training and likely some form of post-secondary education. And I'm not necessarily saying a required 4-year degree. It could be 2-year technical. It could be just certificates and credentialing. And we will be talking about those requirements shortly as well. So let's talk about our demographics. We talk about COVID pushing people out of the workforce, and that's the reason why we have a workforce shortage. But as I mentioned earlier, employers started to see some of those challenges in a pre-COVID world. And the reason why is if you look at the chart on your screen and you look at the population in the 55 to 64 years, and when I say regional labor shed, it's Lackawanna, Luzerne, Wayne, Wyoming, Pike, Monroe, and Susquehanna, because that is the labor shed when we look at commute patterns. And then we also show Lackawanna County separately as well as the state. And you take a look at that 65 to 74. Our numbers are a little higher than the state average. And we've always had a median age that's been higher than most areas in the state and the nation. And what started happening in a pre-COVID world is that first phase of baby boomers started to retire. And it's a national phenomenon. It's going to happen for the next 2 decades of the baby boomer generation. They're going to continue to leave the market at a rapid pace. And so what we saw in a pre-COVID world was just the infancy stage of that happening. And of course, the trend was interrupted by COVID, but now we're moving to what I hope is a post-COVID world. That is still going to continue. And a lot of the workers that were at or before that retirement age have chosen early retirement as a direct result of COVID. When we look at education attainment, we look at where the workforce is now, and you can see that our educational attainment numbers have vastly improved. We still have about 40% of the population either without a high school diploma or are high school graduates. And for our future workforce, that's not enough. Now, some of those high school graduates may have some post-secondary credentials or certifications, Currently, the census and state data does not measure that, but I'm hopeful in the future that that will become a new category because that level of education is going to be extremely important for many of our technical fields. When we look at the breakdown of industry in the chart, the first chart on the left, you're going to see Lackawanna County only. And the second chart, you're going to see that whole labor shed that I talked about. You could see that there's not too much of a difference in comparison. Our workforce is primarily built on the healthcare and social assistance sector. It represents about 1/5 of the total workforce in Lackawanna County and slightly less in the region. While it is followed by retail trade, it should be noted that educational services is another major sector in our community, and hence we've used the term eds and meds as a moniker for our regional economy, and it's very appropriate. Although we do have a good portion of manufacturing, about 10.2% in Lackawanna County, and transportation and warehousing are a little bit lower in Lackawanna County at 6.3% versus the whole labor shed, which is about 9%. So there is some nice diversity. We are a little heavy on the healthcare side, but if you look at comparisons on a state and national basis, again, we're going to see a lot of similarities. Now let's talk about occupational demand by sector. We talked about healthcare and social assistance being that primary generator industry in our region, followed by retail and manufacturing, and then education. And when you look at the total employment, you know, that's showing up on that chart. Now, when we talk about workforce issues, everybody talks about, oh, the industry is going to grow and we're going to have opportunity here. And if you look all the way to the right and you look at that 10-year forecast, that last column that says annual percentage growth, you're going to see that many industry sectors are either in the decline or really showing negligible growth. That is a national phenomenon. Again, another similarity that our economy shares with the national economy. What we need to focus on is that column in blue, total demand. Total demand reflects the growth or decline, but it also reflects exits and transfers of people from those industries. So exits are simply people retiring, leaving the workforce. Transfers are people moving on to a different career path. So when you look at the total demand, while it's saying that there's only a 0.5% growth in healthcare and social assistance, that number, when you look at demand and include those other factors, is already saying we need 20,000 people in healthcare and social assistance over the next decade. If you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you'll see that Lackawanna County needs over 98,000 new workers in the next decade to fill positions in all of those sectors. 98,000. And that is an important number to note because it is significant when you think overall the population of Lackawanna County is about 220,000. So we're talking about replacing a huge percentage of the overall population in Lackawanna County into the workforce in just the next 10 years. So what we have to remember here, I talked a little bit before about people escalating, retiring because of COVID and that baby boomer phenomenon happening. Nationally, it's the same phenomenon. You've got to think of population like a funnel. The top of the funnel is that aging population that's leaving the workforce. The narrow part of the funnel is that younger demographic, that younger population coming up behind them, and that stem of the funnel is much narrower. So in sheer raw numbers, we have less younger people coming through the workforce pipeline than job opportunities. So that means the employee market is very opportunistic for employees. It becomes a very competitive situation for employers and puts some employers, especially small businesses, at risk competing for talent. The challenge we have as a region is this is not only going on within our geographic boundaries, but it's going on across the country. The demographics are the same all across the nation. And with the opportunity for people to live anywhere and work anywhere, it means we are now competing for workers with regions and communities across the country. So retaining our population is extremely, extremely important, but also our ability to attract new workers is important. Because when you look again at that number of what we need over the next decade, that 98,000 in sheer numbers, that is extremely important. The regions that secure the workforce are the regions that are going to remain economically viable. So if this shows anything, it shows that education and workforce development has risen to the top of the priority list of all stakeholders in this region. It is nationally, and we've got to treat it as such, as an economic generator for our region and for our communities. When we look at specifics within those occupations and we start breaking down SOC codes into major categories, you could see where that total demand is in place. Some of those occupations, right now do not require a high skill level. Others, such as healthcare practitioners and technical occupations in healthcare, require four-year degrees, medical school, residency, etc. And there's a significant number, nearly 3,900 are needed to fill those positions in the next 10 years. But what I want to bring to your attention is the fact that even though some of those positions may not appear to require a higher skill level, today, with continued artificial intelligence and automation, people coming into the workforce, even to those new entry-level positions, are going to have a slightly higher skill level than they do now. And that's one of the reasons why we're stressing the importance of not just K through 12 education, but some sort of post-secondary education and training. When we look at real-time intelligence for the last 30 days in the labor shed that of the counties I mentioned earlier, there were over 6,000 jobs posted, listing 438 different occupations at 681 different locations within the region, with almost 1,800 different employees. And you could see when you look at the education requirements, 5 different levels, and they pertain to the 5 different levels I showed you earlier, with high school diploma, some college degree, graduate degree, and a terminal or postgraduate degree. I will talk to you a little bit more about some of the specifics regarding hard skills and soft skills that employers are looking for, as well as the types of programs that are very popular among the jobs that are just posted in the past 30 days. So here are some of the occupation titles. You could see that registered nurses ranks 3rd. There were 280 job announcements for registered nurses for our region just in the past 30 days. Social and human service assistants, 142. That's another high number in a critical field. You can also see that laborers in distribution and manufacturing, truck drivers are also in high demand, customer service representatives, and many of those positions are remote. Licensed practical nurses, nursing assistants. Again, these are just the top few occupations that were listed in the job postings over the past 30 days. These are the locations, and as you can see, many of them offer some form of Scranton in them. Some are specific to zip code, but the majority of the jobs are in the Scranton city itself. But obviously within Lackawanna County, Scranton is the county seat in the largest area. That's where the job opportunities lie. Let's talk about certifications. This is the list of certifications that are attached to those job announcements of driver's license, but many of them are in the healthcare field. Aside from just the registered nurse and the LPN designation, they're looking for CPR certifications, advanced cardiac life support certifications, certified nursing assistants, things like that. That are very critical to maintaining our healthcare workforce infrastructure. When we look at hard skills, this dovetails with exactly what we're hearing from employers through surveys. Computer skills are a top priority, and people are coming in the door without some of that background. As a research institution, we have practicums for students from our colleges and universities, and we have been really surprised at the number of students coming in to do their practicums that don't have experience just in Microsoft Excel, which is where we do a lot of our data analytics. So enhanced computer experience is critical. And if you look down the list, some of the cases, they are identifying specific programs like Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint as skill requirements. When we looked at soft skills, I don't think this will be a surprise, at least to employers. Communication skills, both verbal and written, are extremely important. Cooperative and team player, customer service. Many of these things cannot be taught in school. They're soft skills that are learned through experiences or many practical applications. But we're hearing from employers that they're specifically identifying these skills because the applicants they get and even their entry-level workforce seem to be void of these types of skills. So they're starting to advertise them more to try and bring attention to the needs. When we looked at programs, business, engineering, nursing, and accounting are the top four for those particular job postings that we talked about. And you can see there's some fairly significant numbers in the active job postings for degrees in those areas, including computer science. And then they start to break out the business disciplines such as accounting and finance. And here again, we find social work. That's another critical component to our health and social services infrastructure are the social workers or caseworkers. So let's talk about the myths. The generational cycle of poverty, that is very real. And especially in our region where we have nearly a third of the households earning less than $25,000 per year. And I'm not saying individuals, I'm saying households. So yes, there are about 30% of the households in the region where total family income is less than $25,000 a year. When people are living in that kind of extreme poverty, academic performance isn't at its peak. Obviously, attendance in schools isn't at its peak, but people are worried about meeting basic needs. And at that point, both the workforce and the students are not at their peak. And that has to be a factor in how education, training, and even recruitment and retention of workers are developed. Another myth is the four-year degree. Baby boomer parents are extremely guilty of this in pushing their children into a four-year degree. It is important for so many occupations, but let's face it, there are a number of students that are not prepared for a four-year degree. They don't want a four-year degree, but they're forced down that route by their parents, and they either end up dropping out or they get the degree but don't use it. And those that drop out tend to not pursue any other kind of higher education. So that becomes a particular challenge. I think we showed you that there's incredible opportunity in all facets of occupations. The trades in particular, if I went down the list and we look at the projections for the next 10 years, There are incredible opportunities for the trades, and you can get a 2-year degree, a credentialing certification, apprenticeship within labor unions, but there really is opportunities for everyone. Another myth is education and training. Once you get your degree, you're done. And that is certainly not the case. Occupations are evolving very quickly, and COVID did seem to escalate that. And more is done using all sorts of computer programs and other types of automation. And the workforce needs to evolve with that. So what we need to instill is that there is lifelong learning, and that may be not just reading a how-to book or watching a YouTube video, but going back for another degree, another credential, another certification. In the polling that we do with students from our higher education institutions, we ask annually about whether or not in a postgraduate world, will they work here? Will they stay here in Northeastern Pennsylvania? And we find about half of the students, and that's about 1,000 a year, that equate to that number, say that there's no economic opportunity here. I think what I showed early on in terms of the job growth in so many different sectors, there is opportunity. So it's a perception that we have to make sure our youth understand. There is economic opportunity. Another is wages, that the wages here are lower than everybody else. And then you hear the common argument, well, the cost of living is lower, so yes, the wages are going to be lower. And that is true. However, with COVID and with the worker shortage, there has been significant upward pressure on wages. And in Northeastern Pennsylvania, it's just as dominant and probably excruciating for employers as it is around the country. Entry-level wages are increasing, interim-level wages are increasing, and it's across occupations. So that no longer is an excuse of why individuals cannot get a healthy career or a family-sustaining job in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And finally, the last has to do with quality of life. We often hear that, oh, there's not a lot to do, there's no real quality of life. But when you look at the quality of life indicators, which are housing and amenities and healthcare systems and education, as well as recreation and venue, we really do rank at the top of the list. And I think it's just a matter of an image and identity that we've held for so many years and have not really been successful at changing. But the messaging needs to be different, because there is a very strong quality of life here, regardless of age. And then let's talk about the drivers of success. Strong academic foundations, social and emotional maturity. And I know more programming and social and emotional learning is happening at K through 12, and that will definitely be helpful, because I'll go back to the fact that we have a larger percentage of our population living in poverty in Northeastern Pennsylvania, and children emulate what they learn. And if they're learning things at home that don't demonstrate that emotional maturity, it just perpetuates and goes across generations. So having the ability to learn those skills in the classroom is extremely important. Critical thinking is another aspect, instilling the foundation of lifelong learning. Again, going back to those living in poverty, meeting basic needs is going to be critical if we're going to be successful at developing our pipeline of workers, or as well as our existing workers. Healthcare is another component. The social determinants of health are strongly related to academic performance and worker productivity. And so healthcare is another component that needs to dovetail and work together with education. And then finally, navigation and guidance. Individuals coming from marginalized backgrounds don't have the same opportunity as other students. They're not aware of resources. They don't have family members to help them seek out the resources or go through the process of securing the resources. So navigation and guidance, particularly in middle school through high school, is very important to kids that are coming from marginalized families, to try and level the playing field and create more equity. All of those things together that make up the whole person will determine how successful we are in developing the workforce that we need for the next 20, 30, or 40 years. So with that, I will stop talking because I don't think I've come up for air for nearly 30 minutes now, and you're probably tired of me hearing me, and I'll open it up. Amy's monitoring the chat box in case people have some questions.
Terry, thank you so much. So let's start posting some questions into the chat, and then I'll just ask the first question. Terry, this was great. The information that you gave us is really important as we build career readiness and talent pipeline. If you could give a recommendation of how the business community and education and higher ed, if you were to give your top three, what would you say are the most top three critical items that we should be addressing in the short term?
I think career awareness needs to begin in middle school. And I think the more that school districts can collaborate with businesses and businesses are willing to engage with students at that age to help provide that guidance, that would be the first thing. And the reason why I say middle school is because by the end of 8th grade, students are already picking their coursework for high school. And so having exposure to companies that are in the area, job opportunities, and awareness of the education and skill requirements may help push some of them in a better direction than they might have otherwise chose. So I think that's probably number one. Number two is just recognize that a large percentage of our population does live in poverty. And as a result, things that we tend to expect from children or teenagers and even their parents is not going to be, you can't equate that to families coming from marginalized households. When they're worried about basic needs and making choices between keeping the heat on or buying meds or buying food, they're not going to be focused on helping a kid fill out college applications or responding to a questionnaire about interests and things like that. So I think we have to be aware of that and account for that. And probably the third thing is ensuring that in all of the academic programming that students partake of, that application-oriented work be part of it to help them develop the critical thinking skills, as well as that social and emotional learning. So, because what we want to achieve is not just an educated or a skilled person, but someone who's well-rounded and has those other characteristics that would make them a good employee.
Terry, thank you. That's really important to Skills in Scranton as we work to build a talent pipeline and make sure that our students are career ready, meeting the needs of our business community in the short term and then looking to the long term. We have a question from John. John, yes, the PowerPoint is being recorded and it will be available for viewing on the Chamber's website. And we're also going to be emailing this out to all of our contacts at Skills who have registered for the event and to our K-12 partners. Let's see, we have a question from Carol. PDE has career awareness programs and standards starting in K-12. Schools are now required to meet those career expectations. Thank you for that, Carol.
Yeah, and I would like to make a comment on that, and I am aware of that. I know it's progressive as the children get older, but I do want to make a point of saying that is not equal across school districts. Because not all school districts have the same type of resources to be able to deliver comparable programming. And so students in school districts in the suburbs are likely to have a much more robust program available to them than, say, students in less or poorer districts like in the city of Scranton or in the Mid-Valley. So I think that has to be a consideration. Like I said, we come from areas with higher levels of poverty and concentrated poverty. And so that means that just because things are available, that doesn't mean it's the same opportunity. Does that make sense?
Thank
Okay.
you. One of the things that we're looking to do at Skills is to provide resources to our K-12 partners. And we do that traditionally through Educator in the Workplace program, but due to the impacts of COVID, we've suspended our traditional program this year and hope to bring that to you again at the start of the school year next year. But in the interim, we hope to bring additional programming like the one that we have today. Hopefully someone from the state and the Department of Education in April. We're trying to work that out to discuss Act 158 and bring that information to you, because that's going to be critical, especially for the school districts and the school board directors that are on the call and the guidance counselors and curriculum writers, that we are meeting the needs, connecting you with the business community. Any more questions in the chat for Terry? No? Okay, well, thank you on behalf of Skills in Scranton. Thank you for joining us today. Again, this is going to be recorded and we'll have it for posting on the Chamber's website, and we'll make sure we get the recording out to everybody. Please keep an eye out for future programming. And if you have any questions, please reach out to myself or Emily Petnato on our staff. We're here to help you in any way you need. Tracy, any last comments before we close? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologize. I said no, other than just thanking everybody for making the time out of their afternoon to attend. And again, Terry, thank you for your time and great report and update. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you again. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.